It is 210 BCE. The first emperor of a unified China is dead. But his war is not over. For 2.5 centuries, following the collapse of the Zhou dynasty, the land we now call China was not a single empire. It was a fractured, bleeding landscape of 7 rival states, the era known as the Warring States period, a time of brilliant philosophy and unimaginable carnage. Millions perished in the mud and the dust, fighting for borders that shifted with every season. In the rugged west, the state of Qin survived through a brutal, unforgiving philosophy called legalism. The law was absolute, the state was everything, the individual was nothing. Into this machine, a boy named Yingzheng is born. He becomes king of Qin at 13. He is not just a monarch, he is a weapon forged by a century of relentless warfare. When he finally seizes absolute power in his 20s, he does not just rule, he purges. He exiles his own mother. He forces his region to take his own life. And then he turns his eyes to the rest of the world. Between 230 and 221 BCE, his armies swept across the plains and rivers of the east. It is a blitzkrieg of the ancient world. State by state, the rivals fall. Han, Zhao, Wei, Chu, Yan, Qi. When the final state surrenders in 221 BCE, the war is over. Yingzheng has done what no one in history has ever done. He has unified China. But unification is only the beginning. He abolishes the old titles of kings. He forges a new word for himself, Shi Huang, the first emperor. He standardizes the written script. He standardizes the axle widths of carts. He standardizes weights and measures. He melts down the weapons of his conquered enemies to cast massive bronze statues in his capital. He conquers the living. But the first emperor is terrified of the one thing his armies cannot defeat: death. To rule in the afterlife, he requires an empire, not of flesh and blood, but of earth and fire. He actually begins building his tomb the year he becomes king at age 13. But once he is emperor of all China, the project scales to a level of absolute madness. 700,000 laborers are conscripted. They dig, they bake, they sculpt. The Han Dynasty historian Sima Qian, writing a century later, describes the tomb in terms that sound like pure fantasy. He writes of a ceiling painted with the constellations of the heavens. He writes of a floor featuring a topographical map of the empire, with rivers and oceans made of liquid mercury, mechanically pumped to flow endlessly. For centuries, historians think Sima Qian has been exaggerating. Then, in the 1980s, modern scientists took soil samples from the massive burial mound at Lishan. They find mercury levels 100 times higher than normal. The rivers of mercury are real. But the tomb itself is only the center of a massive, subterranean necropolis. Surrounding it are pits containing clay ministers, acrobats, musicians, and exotic animals. And on the eastern flank, facing the direction of the conquered states, is the army. 8,000 unique clay soldiers. They are not mass-produced from a single mold. They are modular, yes, legs, torsos, and arms crafted in batches, but the heads and faces are individually sculpted. They have different mustaches, different hairstyles, different expressions. They wear armor and carry the bronze weapons of their actual ranks. They are a perfect, frozen reflection of the real Qin war machine. In 210 BCE, during a tour of his vast empire, the first emperor dies. He is only 49. His prime minister, terrified that the news will trigger a rebellion, keeps the secret. They place the emperor in his bronze coffin. To hide the smell of his decaying remains in the summer heat, they order carts of rotting fish to travel alongside the imperial convoy. When they finally reach the capital, the first emperor is lowered into his mercury-rivered tomb. And then, in a final, chilling act of security, the inner gates are dropped and the outer gates sealed. The craftsmen who knew the tomb's secrets are sealed within the walls with him. The first emperor's empire is designed to last for 10,000 generations. It collapses in a peasant rebellion just 15 years later. But his secret army remains in the dark, perfectly preserved, waiting for an emperor who will never return. Let's widen the lens. What was happening across the world while 700,000 men were digging the first emperor's tomb in the dark? While Yingzheng was standardizing axle widths and burying an army of clay, the rest of the globe was in a state of massive, violent transition. Empires were shattering, new philosophies were taking root, and the world was completely blind to the colossal project happening in the east. To the west, the ghost of Alexander the Great still haunted the map. Alexander had died in 323 BCE, nearly a century before Qin Shi Huang's unification. By 221 BCE, his massive empire had shattered into warring fragments ruled by his former generals, the Diadochi. In Egypt, the Ptolemaic dynasty was consolidating power, building the legendary Library of Alexandria and constructing the Pharos lighthouse. In the Middle East, the Seleucid Empire controlled a vast, sprawling territory stretching from Turkey to the borders of India. The contrast between these two worlds at this exact moment is striking. The Hellenistic world was defined by cultural synthesis. Greek language, art, and philosophy were blending with Egyptian and Persian traditions. It was cosmopolitan, urban, and intellectually expansive. The Qin world took a different path, highly centralized, strictly ordered, and deeply pragmatic. Where the Mediterranean celebrated blending traditions, the first emperor prioritized uniformity and cohesion to secure Tianxia. He sought to align the empire's intellectual and administrative landscape, ensuring a single, unified framework to govern a vast, diverse realm, believing that only absolute order could prevent a return to the chaos of the warring states. In India, the Mauryan Empire was in the twilight of its golden age. Ashoka the Great, the emperor who had converted to Buddhism and spread it across the subcontinent, had perished a few decades earlier. His successors were struggling to hold the massive empire together. The political fragmentation in India mirrored the fractured landscape of the warring states that Qin Shi Huang had just brought under a single banner. But while the first emperor consolidated power by restricting rival philosophical schools and standardizing state-approved teachings to enforce legalist order, the Mauryan legacy was leaving behind a deeply rooted tradition of Buddhist philosophy and non-violence. Two distinct approaches to governing a vast, diverse realm, one rooted in strict administrative unity, the other in spiritual and philosophical harmony. Did these two titans of antiquity know about each other? No. The gap between the Hellenistic empires and Qin China was filled by the Parthian Empire in Persia and the vast, unforgiving deserts of Central Asia. In 221 BCE, the first emperor of China and the Hellenistic kings of the Mediterranean were the most powerful men on earth, building monuments that would define their civilizations, completely blind to each other's existence. The Hellenistic world would eventually be swallowed by Rome. The Mauryan Empire would fracture. But the administrative system Qin Shi Huang created, a centralized, bureaucratic state governed by a single written script and unified laws, would outlive him by 2 millennia. He failed to live forever, but he succeeded in building an idea that would define China until the modern era. You can stand exactly where the first emperor's army stands guard, but visiting the Terracotta Warriors requires strategy because this is one of the most visited sites in China. Here is how you navigate it. The Terracotta Warriors Museum and the Mausoleum are in Lintong district, about 40 kilometers east of Xi'an. You can take a public bus from the Xi'an train station, hire a driver, or take the high-speed train to Lintong and a connecting bus. Dedicate a full day to this. To get in, you cannot just show up and buy a ticket at the door. The site caps daily visitors. You must book in advance using the official WeChat mini program. Search for Tianxia Emperor Qin Shi Huang's Mausoleum. You will need to enter your passport details when booking. When you arrive, there are no physical paper tickets. You simply scan your physical passport at the turnstiles to enter. If the app is too difficult to navigate, There are physical help desks at the visitor center, but during peak season, tickets can sell out days in advance. Book early. Start at the Terracotta Museum itself. It is divided into 3 main excavation pits. Pit 1 is the big one. It's the size of several airplane hangars, and it contains the main infantry formation, over 6,000 soldiers. Walk to the very back of the hall first to get a panoramic view. The scale will knock the breath out of you. Then, walk down the side aisles to see the intricate details, the individual tread patterns on their shoes, the rank insignias, the remnants of the original paint. Pit 2 is smaller but more complex. This is where you see the cavalry, the kneeling archers, and the war chariots. Pit 3 is the command center, where the high-ranking officers were placed. Don't miss the bronze chariot exhibition just outside the main pit's half-scale. Incredibly intricate bronze chariots that are a masterclass in ancient metallurgy. After the museum, you must visit the actual mausoleum of Qin Shi Huang, located about 1.5 kilometers away. A free shuttle bus takes you there from the museum exit. Here is the reality. The tomb itself is not open. It will not be open in your lifetime. It is a massive, forested hill. You can walk the perimeter and look at the scale of the earthworks. Why won't they open it? Preservation. When the warriors were first excavated, the sudden exposure to air caused their vibrant paint to flake off in minutes. Modern technology cannot yet guarantee the preservation of silk and organic materials inside the main tomb, plus the toxic mercury vapor. So, the first emperor keeps his secrets. But to truly understand the first emperor, you must leave the tourist trail of Xi'an and cross the Wei River to Xianyang. Xianyang was the actual capital of the Qin Empire. Today, it is a sprawling modern city, but it holds the quiet, original footprint of the first emperor's reign. Visit the Xianyang Museum, located right in the city. It is far less crowded than the provincial museum in Xi'an, and it houses some of the most spectacular Qin dynasty artifacts ever found, including massive bronze weapons, Qin-era currency, and the very tiles that roof the emperor's palaces. Just outside the city, you can walk among the rammed earth foundations of the Qin Xianyang Palace. There are no grand reconstructed buildings here, just vast, silent earthworks stretching toward the horizon. Standing there, you feel the true, staggering scale of the administrative center that commanded the conquest of the known world. A short drive from Xianyang brings you to the Epang Palace ruins. This was the first emperor's grand, unfinished mega-palace. Historical texts describe it as so massive that it could seat 10,000 people. The first emperor intended it to be the ultimate symbol of his eternal rule, but he perished before it was finished, and his successor abandoned the project. Shortly after, it was allegedly burned to the ground by rebel armies, with the fires said to have burned for months. Today, Epang Palace is an archaeological park. There are no grand halls, left only the colossal, weathered pillars of rammed earth rising out of the grass. It is quiet, atmospheric, and largely empty of tourists. It is the perfect place to reflect on the hubris and the ultimate collapse of the Qin dynasty. As for the famous Xi'an City Wall, if you want to experience the ultimate bicycle tour along the ancient Ming Dynasty ramparts, we dedicated an entire segment to that in our first episode. Click the video card on your screen right now to watch that guide. Finally, if you have time before leaving Lintong, spend your late afternoon at the Huaqing Hot Springs, nestled at the base of Lishan Mountain. Legend says the first emperor himself bathed in these natural thermal springs. You can book Huaqing via its own WeChat mini program Huatinggong, or simply buy tickets at the physical visitor center on arrival. It rarely sells out like the Terracotta Warriors. Beyond the Tang Dynasty architecture, this is also where modern Chinese history pivoted in 1936. Chiang Kai-shek was kidnapped by his own generals here in the Xi'an incident. You can still see the bullet holes in the walls of his hiding spot in the mountains behind the springs. The best time to visit Xi'an and Xianyang is April, May, or September, October. Summer is brutally hot and crowded. Winter is freezing. Fly into Xi'an Xianyang International Airport, or take the high-speed rail from Beijing or Shanghai. The high-speed train from Xi'an to Xianyang takes less than 20 minutes. making it incredibly easy to base yourself in Xi'an and do a day trip to the Qin ruins. Qin Shi Huang was a ruler of extraordinary ambition and profound contradiction. From a macro-historical perspective, his achievements outweigh his faults, truly an emperor for all ages. He created the Great Unification system, standardized writing and economy, and expanded China's territory. His reforms deeply influenced Chinese civilization for over 2,000 years. Without Qin Shi Huang, the land of Huaxia might have remained fragmented for centuries, making it impossible to form a unified nation and cultural community. Yet, from the perspective of the common people of his time, his faults outweighed his achievements. The high-pressure rule after unification, endless corvée labor, and cruel punishments caused immense suffering to the people. Social contradictions intensified rapidly, and the Qin dynasty fell in its second generation, lasting only 15 years. He believed that only through absolute unity could Tianxia, all under heaven, be secured from the chaos of the past. But the immense pressure of this vision proved too heavy for his successors. But his legacy endures in China to this day. He gave China its name. Qin is the root of the word China. He proved that the vast fractured lands of the East could be and should be one single entity. The concept of a unified Tianxia became the eternal blueprint for every subsequent dynasty. He established the administrative framework that every subsequent ruler would inherit and adapt for 2,000 years. Next time, we leave the dust of the north and head to the rivers of the south. The year is 208 CE. A massive northern fleet is about to sail down the Yangtze River. But waiting for them in the fog at a place called Red Cliffs is a brilliant strategist, a bundle of fire ships, and a tactical genius that will birth the legend of the Three Kingdoms. I'm Jean, this is the Compass Dragon. See you in 2 weeks.